autographs with smiles that made fans swoon, and some of them had blood on their hands. Hollywood's golden age wasn't just about glamour and fame, it hid darker secrets that studio fixers and powerful lawyers worked overtime to bury. Behind the carefully crafted public images of some of entertainment's biggest names lurked shocking truths. Some celebrities didn't just play killers in movies, they actually took human lives. These weren't on-screen deaths that could be fixed with editing or special effects. They were real people who died at the hands of stars we celebrated, applauded, and invited into our living rooms. Some cases made headlines before being strategically erased from public memory. Others were covered up so completely that the truth only emerged decades later. Studio publicity departments didn't just hide affairs and drinking problems, explains former entertainment journalist Margaret Collins. They buried homicides. They made witnesses disappear. They paid off police. When a valuable star was involved in a death, the studio machinery mobilized with military precision to protect their investment, regardless of who had to be silenced. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on entertainment's darkest chapter, 10 celebrated figures from Hollywood's golden age who actually ended human lives. Some killed in drunken rages, others in jealous fury. A few claimed accident or self-defense. But in every case, someone died while the entertainment industry worked to ensure the show went on. These aren't just scandalous stories. They're a window into a system that valued profit over justice and image over truth, where being famous enough could sometimes mean getting away with murder.
So I don't regret it. Incidentally, the damage to health is minimal.
The literary killer, William S. Burroughs. William S. Burroughs wasn't just any writer. As a towering figure in the Beat generation and eventual cult film actor, Burroughs created groundbreaking works like Naked Lunch that influenced generations of artists. His gaunt face and deadpan delivery made him an instantly recognizable cultural icon. He was also a killer who shot his wife in the face and largely got away with it. In 1951, Burroughs shot and killed his wife Joan Vollmer while playing William Tell at a party in Mexico City, explains literary historian Dr. Robert Stevens. The basic facts aren't disputed, even by Burroughs himself. While drinking heavily at a gathering, he announced he would perform the William Tell trick of shooting an object off someone's head. His wife placed a gin glass on her head. Burroughs aimed his pistol, and instead of hitting the glass, he shot her directly in the forehead, killing her instantly. What happened next demonstrated the privilege that even moderately famous Americans could wield in certain jurisdictions. Despite the presence of multiple witnesses to what was, at minimum, a case of fatal recklessness, Burroughs spent just 13 days in jail. He claimed it was an accident, fled the country, never served serious jail time, Stevens continues. His wealthy family sent a Mexican attorney with significant connections to handle the case. Burroughs was released on bail equivalent to about $2,000 and promptly left Mexico while awaiting trial. He was eventually convicted in absentia of homicide, but by then he was safely beyond Mexican jurisdiction. The most disturbing aspect of this killing isn't just the minimal consequences Burroughs faced, but how the incident became perversely incorporated into his literary mystique. Rather than destroying his career, his wife's death became part of the Burroughs legend, the dark chapter that supposedly pushed him towards serious writing. Burroughs himself occasionally referred to the killing as an accident, but later made the chilling statement that the death of Joan activated the ugly spirit within him and set him on the path to becoming a writer. He transformed a woman's violent death into part of his personal creation myth. He called it a mistake, but she was still dead. This stark reality hung over Burroughs' subsequent literary fame and cultural celebrity. While he achieved acclaim for works like Naked Lunch, Junkie, and The Soft Machine, Joan Vollmer, herself a significant intellectual figure in the early Beat movement, was reduced to a footnote in his biography. Her life and potential permanently extinguished at age 28. Burroughs' career flourished after the killing, eventually leading to film appearances, wide recognition as a literary giant, and collaboration with musicians and artists who treated him as a counterculture hero. The man who shot his wife in the head became a celebrated cultural figure while she remained forever 28, her promise unfulfilled, her voice permanently silenced by the husband who later built his legend partly on her grave.
And on October 19, 1978, just 3 weeks after marrying his fifth wife, the 64-year-old actor murdered her and then committed suicide.
The Wedding Night Murderer, Gig Young. Gig Young embodied Hollywood charm, With his handsome features and smooth delivery, he built a successful career playing sophisticated, urbane characters, the quintessential man about town who could deliver a witty line with perfect timing. His performance in They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Finally earned him an Academy Award in 1970 after 2 previous nominations. Just 8 years after reaching that career peak, Young created a real-life horror scene that shocked even hardened Hollywood veterans. Gig Young was an Oscar-winning actor who seemed to have everything, notes film historian Michael Barnes. But behind that polished exterior lurked serious demons: alcoholism, depression, and increasingly erratic behavior that worried those close to him. Still, no one anticipated the shocking violence that would end his life and that of his young bride. On September 27, 1978, just 3 weeks after marrying his 5th wife, 31-year-old German actress Kim Schmidt, Young enacted an incomprehensible final scene in their Manhattan apartment. In 1978, just after getting married, he shot his wife in their apartment, then turned the gun on himself, explains Barnes. The bodies were discovered by their building's security director after friends became concerned about unanswered phone calls. Young had shot his new bride in the head before turning the .38 caliber handgun on himself. The murder-delf death left Hollywood stunned. There was no death note, no clear motive, and no warning signs specific enough to have prevented the tragedy. Young had struggled with alcoholism for years and reportedly suffered from depression, but the extreme violence seemed to come out of nowhere. What makes this case particularly disturbing is the timing. Young had just married Schmidt, hardly the typical point for a relationship to end in murder-self-death. Friends reported that Young had seemed relatively happy about the marriage, though some noted concerns about his mental state in the months prior. The wedding champagne hadn't even gone flat yet. This observation captures the jarring juxtaposition of a wedding followed almost immediately by the violent deaths of both newlyweds. The champagne toasts celebrating their union had barely ended before their bodies were being removed from the apartment they had just begun to share. Young's career had been in decline before the murder-delf death, but he remained a recognizable Hollywood figure with a distinguished resume including films like Teacher's Pet, The Three Sisters, and his Oscar-winning turn in They Shoot Horses, Don't They? His death transformed his legacy overnight, from respected actor in temporary career decline to perpetrator of a shocking murder that erased any possibility of the comeback many believed he might achieve. The case reveals how completely someone can hide violent potential beneath a sophisticated exterior. Young had spent decades playing charming, urbane characters, creating a public persona that gave no hint of the violence he was capable of inflicting. His final act rewrote his entire life story, transforming all that came before into mere prelude to an act of violence that would permanently define him in public memory. The comeback killer, Paul Kelly. Paul Kelly achieved what few could imagine. He killed a man with his bare hands, went to prison, and then returned to Hollywood for a successful second act. His story represents perhaps the most complete rehabilitation of any celebrity killer, demonstrating both the power of studio image management and the industry's willingness to overlook even homicide when profitable stars were involved. Paul Kelly was a Broadway and silent film actor with a promising career in the 1920s, explains entertainment historian Thomas Henderson. But that career was interrupted by a violent confrontation that left another man dead and Kelly facing serious prison time, a situation that would have permanently ended most Hollywood journeys. The deadly incident occurred in 1927, when Kelly confronted actor Ray Raymond over an affair Kelly was having with Raymond's wife, Dorothy McKay. What began as a verbal confrontation escalated to physical violence. In 1927, he beat another man to death in a brawl over a woman, Henderson continues. Kelly went to Raymond's home to discuss the situation involving Dorothy McKay. The discussion quickly turned violent, with Kelly severely beating Raymond. While Raymond initially survived the attack, he died 2 days later from the injuries Kelly inflicted. Kelly was charged with manslaughter rather than murder, suggesting prosecutors believed he had not intended to kill Raymond despite the severity of the beating. After conviction, he was sentenced to 1 to 10 years in San Quentin State Prison, a relatively light sentence for a death that resulted from intentional violence. He served 25 months in San Quentin, came back to Hollywood like nothing happened. This remarkable comeback represents one of Hollywood's most successful image rehabilitation projects. After serving just over 2 years, Kelly returned to an industry that not only allowed him to work again, but eventually elevated him to greater success than he had achieved before killing Raymond. The studio's willingness to welcome Kelly back wasn't just about forgiveness. It reflected calculated business decisions about his marketability and talent. Kelly had served his official sentence, displayed appropriate contrition, and still possessed the acting abilities that had made him valuable before the killing. From a purely financial perspective, his proven skills outweighed any moral considerations about employing a man who had beaten another to death. Adding another layer to this disturbing story, Kelly eventually married Dorothy McKay, the very woman over whom the fatal fight had occurred. Mackay herself had served time for concealing evidence related to her husband's death, receiving a 1-year sentence for accessory after the fact. Their marriage, after both had served their respective sentences, created a strange coda to the violent death that had connected them. Kelly's post-prison career flourished, with notable roles in films like The Flying Tigers, The Glass Key, and Crossfire. He successfully transitioned from silent films to talkies, and from villain roles to more sympathetic characters, eventually earning respect as a versatile character actor. By the time of his death in 1956, many in the audience had no knowledge of the killing that had temporarily derailed his career decades earlier. He got a sentence, then he got a comeback. This simple statement captures the extraordinary arc of Kelly's story, the way he managed to serve minimal time for taking a life and then return to the very industry that typically demanded moral exemplars for its leading roles. His successful reintegration reveals how completely Hollywood could separate public image from private history when sufficient financial incentive existed. Kelly's case established a precedent for celebrity rehabilitation that subsequent generations would follow, the narrative of redemption after serious transgression that allows audiences to embrace fallen stars once an appropriate period of contrition has passed. That this pattern was established in a case involving actual homicide reveals how malleable public opinion could be when shaped by studio publicity and the passage of time. The career casualty, Fatty Arbuckle. Roscoe. Fatty Arbuckle's case stands as one of Hollywood's most notorious scandals, a career destroyed by a death he was legally absolved of causing. While Arbuckle was acquitted of manslaughter after 3 trials, the court of public opinion rendered a different verdict, creating Hollywood's first example of cancellation long before the term existed. Fatty Arbuckle was accused of manslaughter in the death of actress Virginia Rapp in 1921, explains film historian Margaret Collins. The case became a media sensation that permanently altered both Arbuckle's career and the entire structure of Hollywood's relationship with public morality. The incident occurred at a Labor Day party in San Francisco's St. Francis Hotel. Arbuckle, then one of the highest-paid stars in Hollywood, with a contract worth $1 million, equivalent to over $14 million today, hosted a gathering where Rapp became seriously ill. She died days later from peritonitis, caused by a ruptured bladder. What exactly happened in that hotel room remains disputed nearly a century later. The prosecution claimed Arbuckle's weight had injured Rapp during a sex, while the defense maintained she had a pre-existing condition that caused her bladder to rupture naturally. The sensationalist press coverage suggested far more lurid scenarios involving bottles and other objects that were never substantiated by medical evidence. Arbuckle was tried 3 times, finally acquitted, Collins continues. The first 2 trials ended with hung juries, while the third resulted in not just acquittal, but an unusual statement from the jury expressing regret for the ordeal Arbuckle had endured. The jury deliberated for just 6 minutes before finding him not guilty, indicating how weak they found the prosecution's case. Despite this legal vindication, the damage to Arbuckle's career and reputation was irreversible. The newly formed Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, MPPDA, headed by former Postmaster General Will Hayes, banned Arbuckle from appearing on screen even after his acquittal, a ban that was officially lifted after several months, but remained effectively in place through industry-wide reluctance to cast him. His career was destroyed anyway. This stark reality reflected how completely public perception had turned against Arbuckle, regardless of the legal outcome. Theaters refused to show his existing films, contracts were canceled, and the jovial screen persona that had made him one of silent comedy's biggest stars was permanently tainted by association with scandal and death. What makes Arbuckle's case particularly significant is how it established the template for Hollywood's handling of celebrity scandal, the way a star could be sacrificed to protect the broader industry, regardless of actual guilt or innocence. Arbuckle became the scapegoat for Hollywood's perceived moral failings at a time when the film industry faced increasing scrutiny from religious and civic organizations concerned about its influence on public morality. Legally innocent, but nobody ever forgot the headlines. This observation captures the fundamental injustice of Arbuckle's situation, the gap between his legal exoneration and the permanent destruction of his public image. The sensationalist coverage that accompanied his case created lasting impressions that no subsequent legal finding could erase from public consciousness. Arbuckle eventually returned to the industry as a director under the pseudonym William Goodrich, working behind the camera since his face was no longer marketable. He had just begun a tentative return to on-screen performance with Warner Brothers when he died of a heart attack in 1933 at age 46, having never recaptured anything approaching his former stature. While technically not a killer according to the courts, Arbuckle's permanent association with Rapp's death makes his case an essential part of any examination of how Hollywood handles stars connected to loss of life. His story demonstrates that in the court of public opinion, legal innocence provides little protection when scandal, sensation, and moral panic converge around a celebrity name.
We, the jury in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Robert Blake, not guilty of the crime of first-degree murder of Bonnie Lee Bakley, in violation of Penal Code Section.
The acquitted suspect, Robert Blake. Robert Blake's career spanned Hollywood eras, from child star in the Our Gang series to Emmy-winning actor on Beretta in the 1970s. His intense performances and distinctive raspy voice made him a television icon, particularly as the detective who kept a cockatoo as a pet and delivered the catchphrase, "And that's the name of that tune." This long career ended in scandal when Blake became the central figure in one of Hollywood's most notorious murder cases, one where legal acquittal failed to erase lingering public suspicion. Robert Blake was a former child star who later became famous for his title role in Beretta, notes criminal justice analyst James Morrison. His career effectively ended in 2001 when his second wife, Bonnie Lee Bakley, was shot to death outside a Studio City restaurant where the couple had just had dinner. The circumstances surrounding Bakley's death immediately raised questions about Blake's potential involvement. According to Blake's account, he had left Bakley in the car while returning to the restaurant to retrieve a gun he claimed to have accidentally left behind. Upon returning to the vehicle, he found Bakley shot in the head. Blake was accused of murdering his wife, Bonnie Lee Bakley, in 2001, Morrison continues. The case became a media sensation, with investigators focusing on Blake's troubled relationship with Bakley, whom he had married reluctantly after paternity tests confirmed he was the father of her child. Their relationship was characterized by tension and mutual distrust, with Blake reportedly resenting being trapped in a marriage he hadn't wanted. The prosecution alleged that Blake had either killed Bakley himself or hired someone to do so, presenting testimony from stuntmen who claimed Blake had approached them about killing his wife. Blake's defense team highlighted the lack of physical evidence connecting him to the shooting and suggested alternative theories, including the possibility that Bakley, who had a history of running scams targeting celebrities, might have been killed by another victim of her schemes. Blake was acquitted in criminal court, found liable in civil court, explains Morrison. This split verdict mirrors other high-profile cases like the O.J. Simpson trials, where the different standards of proof between criminal and civil proceedings led to seemingly contradictory outcomes. The criminal jury wasn't convinced of Blake's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, while the civil jury found a preponderance of evidence suggesting his responsibility. The civil verdict included an $30 million judgment against Blake, later reduced to $15 million, effectively bankrupting the former star despite his criminal acquittal. This financial penalty, combined with a permanent cloud of suspicion, ensured that Blake would never work in Hollywood again, regardless of his legal innocence in criminal court. He swore he didn't pull the trigger. The jury wasn't so sure. This observation captures the ambiguity that continues to surround the case, the gap between Blake's vehement declarations of innocence and the lingering doubts that prevented his reintegration into the entertainment industry or public acceptance of his version of events. Blake's case represents a more modern version of the Fatty Arbuckle paradigm, the star who, regardless of legal outcome, becomes permanently defined by association with a violent death. The entertainment industry's unwillingness to work with Blake after his acquittal reflected not just moral judgment, but practical business considerations about audience reception to a performer widely suspected of involvement in his wife's death, regardless of the criminal verdict. Blake died in March 2023 at age 89, having spent the final 2 decades of his life in the shadow of Bakley's murder. Despite occasional interviews maintaining his innocence, he never escaped public association with the crime, demonstrating how completely a single incident can redefine a career that had previously spanned 6 decades in entertainment.
Baby, and he got the impression it belonged to you.
Well, I demand an apology.
Well, on taking a second look, ma'am, I think an apology is in order.
I'm sorry, baby.
Vegas cover-up, Rex Bell. Rex Bell represented the perfect Hollywood to politics pipeline, a handsome Western star who married sex symbol Clara Bow before transitioning to a successful second career in Nevada politics. As lieutenant governor and a prominent businessman, Bell embodied the respectable public figure with impeccable connections. Behind this carefully maintained image lurked allegations of a covered-up killing that never made the newspapers, a case that demonstrated how completely Hollywood power could sometimes bury even the most serious offenses. Clara Bow's husband Rex Bell Bell allegedly beat a man to death in a Vegas hotel in 1937, explains Nevada historian Dr. Sarah Jenkins. While never proven in court, because it never reached a courtroom, this incident has persisted in accounts from multiple sources familiar with early Las Vegas history and the Hollywood figures who frequented the developing desert destination. According to these accounts, Bell was involved in an altercation with a man who had made remarks about his wife, screen legend Clara Bow. The confrontation reportedly occurred in a hotel where Bell had substantial business connections, escalating from verbal exchange to physical violence that allegedly ended with the unidentified man's death. Studio lawyers made it disappear, Jenkins continues. This case represents a particularly stark example of how studio legal departments could function almost as private justice systems when protecting valuable assets. Bell's ongoing marriage to Clara Bow, despite their increasingly separate lives, meant that scandal touching him could affect her marketability, creating studio incentive to contain any potentially damaging situations. What distinguishes this case from better documented Hollywood scandals is the completeness of its suppression. Unlike incidents that generated initial headlines before being managed through the legal system, the alleged Bell killing appears to have been contained before generating any contemporary public record. Witnesses allegedly paid for silence, local authorities persuaded to look the other way, and any potential evidence quietly handled by fixers with connections to both Hollywood and the developing Las Vegas power